The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent. Chapter 21. Secrets in the Stacks. Evie woke early Monday morning. The soft morning light brightened the yellow walls of Lizzie's kitchen as she sipped her coffee. She tapped her fingers against the ceramic mug, the cryptic message from the Crypto Arcanum looping endlessly in her thoughts. 236. Mors Immatura. Untimely death. And Lizzie's burial plot just happened to be 236? That was no coincidence. Spinks padded over to her feet, stretching and giving a soft chirp of greeting. "You're not worried about this, are you, buddy?" Evie asked, scratching behind his ears. He purred in response, but his knowing yellow eyes made her wonder if maybe he understood more than he let on. With a sigh, she stood, setting the empty mug in the sink. Today, she needed answers, and if Lizzie's death had been a murder rather than a heart attack, she wasn't going to let it go unsolved. A morning return to the shop. The shop was quiet and cool when Evie arrived, the scent of herbs and lavender still lingering in the air. She carried the Crypto Arcanum with her, safely wrapped in an old scarf, and placed it back in its hidden drawer in the antique roll-top desk upstairs. "Don't let this thing out of your sight," James had warned her the night before. But she didn't want it at her house again, not after the vivid dreams it seemed to trigger. The shop felt like its natural home, and the locked drawer seemed safe enough for now. James appeared in the faint shimmer of morning sunlight filtering through the window. "You're starting to feel it, aren't you?" "Feel what?" she asked, locking the drawer and turning to him. "The weight of it," he said, gesturing toward the desk. "The Crypto Arcanum doesn't just drop a mystery in your lap. It makes sure it burrows under your skin, makes you obsessed until you unravel it. Lizzie used to say the same thing. It's like the book knows how to get inside your head." Evie shivered. "Great, so I can look forward to more cryptic Latin messages and sleepless nights?" James grinned, but his tone was serious. "It's not going to get easier, Evie, and remember what I said, it doesn't handhold, Taff. Lizzie told me once the Crypto Arcanum wasn't at its full power, but she never explained what she meant by that. Maybe she didn't even know. All I do know is that it's dangerous to open doors you're not ready for." Evie's stomach twisted at his words, but if the book wanted her to solve Lizzie's murder, there was no going back now. After tidying the front counter, Evie moved a small display of Lizzie's herbal soaps and noticed a yellowed piece of paper sticking out from behind it. Frowning, she unfolded the note, her pulse quickening as she recognized Lizzie's handwriting. "Trust takes time to bloom, but danger often lurks in the shadows of familiarity. Beware the wolf in the bookstore." Evie's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Hugo Bates immediately came to mind. She'd met him at the reopening, and while he'd seemed pleasant enough, his name was attached to the terse note Lizzie had received refusing to sell her shop. Was this a warning Lizzie had written to herself, or had she meant for someone else, possibly even Evie, to find it? James materialized near the door. "What have you got there?" Evie handed him the note, watching his expression darken as he read it. "I think it's about Hugo. Do you know anything about him?" James shook his head. "Only what Lizzie ever mentioned in passing, that he owned the other bookstore in town and was always pestering her to sell this place. They got along, but she wasn't overly fond of him, that much was clear. Called him pompous. But I never got the sense she thought he was dangerous." "Well, this doesn't sound like she thought he was harmless." Evie folded the note and slipped it into her bag. "I think it's time to pay him a visit." Hugo's bookstore, Books and Beans, was on the next block over, nestled between a bakery and a stationery shop. The exterior was painted a deep green, with golden lettering on the windows, and a bell that chimed softly as Evie stepped inside. The scent of old paper and leather bindings greeted her, along with the sight of towering shelves crammed with books. It was cozier than she'd expected, though the lighting was dim and the atmosphere had a slightly oppressive weight. "Ah, Miss Hutchison!" Hugo appeared from behind a shelf, a book tucked under his arm. His graying brown hair was neatly combed, and he wore a smart waistcoat that made him look like he'd just stepped out of a Victorian novel. "What a pleasant surprise! What brings you to my humble establishment?" "Curiosity," Evie said, forcing a smile. "I figured I should get to know the other bookshop in town." Hugo chuckled warmly. Well, I'm delighted you stopped by, and might I say your reopening was a resounding success. When I stopped by, it was rather busy at the time. How are you settling in? Good so far, Evie said, glancing around the shop. Though I imagine I've got a long way to go to match your operation. This place is amazing. Hugo waved a hand dismissively. Oh, nonsense. I've been at it a long time and deal in a lot of old, antique, and sometimes rare books, but Lizzie's shop was always the more charming of the two. I imagine you'll have no trouble maintaining her loyal customer base. Evie hesitated, then decided to press a little further. Did you know Lizzie well? Well enough, I suppose, Hugo said, his smile faltering slightly. She was a private woman, but we crossed paths often enough. Booksellers tend to run in the same circles, you know, and Lizzie always loved old rare books. She mentioned you'd offered to buy her shop a few times, Evie said casually, watching his reaction. Hugo's smile tightened. I may have mentioned it once or twice. It was an ideal location, after all. But Lizzie was quite firm in her refusal, and I respected that. Though I know I'm not the only one interested in buying property around Stony Fork. Why? I heard that Mr. Simoneau had tried to purchase that large sect of land from Philip Crawford. You know, the real estate developer here in town. The property between the edge of town and Lizzie's, well, your house now. Tried? Evie asked. Hugo smiled and leaned in slightly, as if to spill a secret. Oh, yes. Rumor has it that he had gotten on the hook for a large sum of money having the property inspected, mapped, and such, but then could not manage to get the funds to go through with the purchase. He fluttered his hand dismissively. But you know how rumors are in a small town. Evie nodded, pretending to accept his answer, though she couldn't shake the feeling that Hugo was holding something back. Well, it's a lovely shop you've got here. I'll have to come back when I have more time to browse. Do, Hugo said, his smile returning. And if you ever want a special tome, advice, or tea, don't hesitate to stop by. On her way back to her shop, Evie decided to stop in at the Witch's Cauldron. Mabel greeted her with exaggerated enthusiasm, but the atmosphere inside the shop felt tense, as though the air itself was charged. Evie couldn't help but notice the slight smirk on Mabel's face as she asked, So, how's the new witch in town settling in? Well enough, Evie replied, keeping her tone light. It's been a lot to take in, but I think I'm starting to find my footing. Mabel leaned closer, her eyes glinting with curiosity. And how about the other things? I imagine Lizzie left you with more than just the shop, Evie's stomach flipped, but she forced a smile. I'm not sure what you mean. Mabel chuckled softly, her gaze lingering on Evie for a moment before she turned back to rearrange a display of crystals. Oh, nothing. Just making conversation. Let me know if you ever need any guidance. The interaction left Evie uneasy, and as she walked back to her shop, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mabel knew more about Lizzie, and possibly the crypto-arcanum, than she let on. That evening, after tidying the shop and locking up, Evie finally returned home. She stared out at the river, her thoughts racing. Hugo's smooth answers, Mabel's cryptic remarks, and Lizzie's ominous note all swirled in her mind. And then there was the crypto-arcanum. What other secrets would it reveal? What dangers was it leading her toward? Evie sighed and glanced at Spinks, who was curled up contentedly on the couch. I don't know what I've gotten myself into, buddy, she whispered. But I'm not backing down now.